Hello, I'm Debbie Hepplewhite and my field is phonics and the teaching of reading, spelling and handwriting. I wanted to make a short video and trying to be as succinct as possible to contribute to comments made by the general public about phonics and the teaching of reading, which the government in England is calling for at the moment. I've entitled this video Phonics and the Resistance to Reading, because this encapsulates what's going on in our country and actually in other countries around the world. I've taken that title from this little book here. The author of this book is a gentleman called Lloyd-Jones, and he's achieved in a very small book, very readable, a description of historic and current resistance to the teaching of phonics and how this is affecting the teaching of reading. So I believe this is very important. And there are other people like me in the field of phonics who are also programme authors who support Mike in the writing of this book. So this is the purpose of my video, and I'd like you to excuse my scruffy notes. My husband told me that they're a little bit wonky and not very good, but in a way they're for my purpose, to keep me moving along. So bear with me. I'm trying to raise awareness about the findings of research on reading, but actually I'm not the only one. This raising of awareness is collaborative. This includes researchers across the world. It includes programme authors like myself. We work together as a team, and we've had to work very hard to challenge orthodoxies of the day, government promotion, official guidance, which was flawed and not based on the research findings. So it's collaborative and it's international, and it's hugely important, because the method that is used to teach your children to read can make a substantial difference. There's always a group of children in every class who are so able and maybe get so much help from home that they succeed no matter what. Maybe you yourself are one of these children, so you can't understand the emphasis on phonics teaching nowadays because perhaps you didn't receive explicit phonics teaching when you were a child and you've become literate, or your children have become literate without it. So it's very controversial, and the job is not done to this day, despite recent official backing and despite lots of reviews about the best way to teach reading. There still are many misunderstandings, and therefore I'm still going to suggest that what your children receive in schools by way of teaching reading in the English language is still left to chance. Now, a lot of these misunderstandings are not just about Joe Public and what the ordinary person on the street thinks. These misunderstandings are amongst the teaching profession themselves, the teacher training profession, children's authors who've grouped together and signed petitions against the Year 1 Phonics screening check in England, and even teaching union leaders. So the debate is very challenging. Okay, so let's think about the word phonics. Phonics is not new, but phonics has gone in and out of fashion over decades and decades. Sometimes there's been phonics and also a look and say approach, so combined approaches or mixed approaches. But basically phonics is about teaching the alphabetic code of the language. Now, you may or may not know that the alphabetic code of the English language is the most complex alphabetic code in the world. So we can identify around 44 units of sound when the sound is at the smallest level in our speech, but there are many spelling alternatives that are code for those sounds. And we have a historic reason for this, where people from different countries with different spoken languages have come to England, and when the writing systems in those countries were invented, our spelling in the English language has become very complex. Now, it's because the English language is so very complex that it is essential that teachers unpick it and teach it explicitly and directly to our children. We then need to look at the different types of phonics and the different types of programmes, because there's a big difference between a programme which is very content rich very well thought through, and usually they're in a modern context, and the quality of the resources and the guidance underpinning the programs and the actual approach. And all of these things combined together will lead to their effectiveness. Now, what is not understood by most people is the difference between a framework for teaching phonics and a program itself. And even amongst my close colleagues and associates, there's disagreement of what definition of a program is or not. I personally maintain that in order to unpick that really complex code, and for teachers to be able to teach up to 30 or so children of all different descriptions with different background experiences, that they need to be supported by very effective teaching, systematic teaching resources and learning resources, and there should be a way of sharing that information with home. And I'm going to suggest that the programme that's most well known about and highly regarded, Letters and Sounds, that was published in England in 2007, is not really a programme, it's a detailed framework. And that as teachers have translated that into a programme, they've done that to various degrees of success. So if a school says it's a Letters and Sounds school, members of the public cannot know or understand what that looks like. So some teachers have made their own resources to deliver this framework. Some teachers will have found free resources or a combination of commercial resources, or even bought into a core programme to deliver Letters and Sounds, but still it's chance what the children get. So there are many reasons why I don't consider that to be a full programme, and I'm going to produce other information and videos to make that clear. However, the overarching conclusion of that is that content quality and approach really matters in terms of effectiveness. Now, I've mentioned already that in England in 2012 the government introduced a statutory screening check for phonics that children would undertake when they're around the age of 6 at the end of year 1. And the screening check consists of 40 words. 20 words are real words and 20 words are pseudo words or non-words. There's a huge amount of controversy surrounding this check, and many people do not regard it very highly, so a lot of the critics include people like children's authors, teaching union leaders, literacy bodies, and so on. And this is really rather worrying, because this simple check, and this has given us a snapshot of whether teachers are effective in their phonics teaching or not. Now, it's perfectly possible to be an excellent teacher and to teach your heart out, but not to be effective in this particular field. And many teachers and local authority advisors and others have been shocked when schools doing apparently well have had much lower results on the Year 1 phonics screening check than schools which are in more challenged areas. So the check is very important for informing us on a professional level about our teaching effectiveness. So I would encourage people to take the Year 1 phonics screening check, and my work is actually international, and I have some international schools that have volunteered to take this check and got better results than the national average results in England, which really demonstrates that even in bilingual or multilingual situations, teachers may be more effective in their teaching. So I would say that this is still very revealing that the teaching profession in England are very divided on the importance of that check. Now, people like myself had to lobby the government many years ago to draw attention to flaws in their teacher training. And as a consequence of all this hard work and this lobbying, and now pointing to research that's internationally based, because we had research going on in the United States of America and in Australia, all looking into the effectiveness of teaching reading. As a consequence of that, the government of the day commissioned Sir Jim Rose to do an independent review of the teaching of early reading. Now, Jim Rose brought out a very important report. This is a historic document, and it is full of common sense observations of leading schools using different practices, and it's still relevant to this day. So Jim Rose pointed out that regardless of children's differences and their different abilities, their different levels of spoken language, that it should not be left to chance that they were able to unpick the English alphabetic code for themselves. So he addressed the questions and the challenges that people were raising about the teaching of reading. And he recommended an understanding for teachers of the processes of teaching reading in a model or a diagram called the simple view of reading. Now, this was not a new diagram or a new model. This was brought out in around 1986 by researchers Goff and Tunler. And this was to replace the then understanding of what's called the Searchlight's multi-cueing reading strategies. That is where teachers were trained to use a lot of different strategies to get children to lift the words off the page, including things like guessing words from the pictures, or if they couldn't read a word, to read on to the end of the sentence and to go back and to substitute a word that made sense, or to check that with the beginning of the word, and so on. But basically, these Searchlight's multi-cueing reading strategies were shown to be flawed by research and certainly wouldn't serve children in the long term. However, this is what is shocking. In May 2014, the National Foundation for Educational Research brought out a report which had surveyed teachers in England to look at what practices they used, what the views were of systematic synthetic phonics, and the Year 1 phonics screening check. The Department for Education have actually commissioned an FER to do a series of surveys over this period of phonics promotion to see how things might change over the years. Now, in broad terms, what this report revealed is that largely about a third of schools are very supportive of systematic synthetic phonics, and also they're happy about the Year 1 phonics screening check and understand that it's informing their practices. In fact, I know of many teachers who are excited about the check because they want to know how well their children are doing, and they recognise that they can make year-on-year improvements. About a third of the schools were doing and supporting systematic synthetic phonics, but they're not at all happy about the Year 1 phonics screening check, believing the check is unnecessary and that they don't need it to inform their practices. However, I would suggest that they don't understand the importance of the government getting an overview of teaching effectiveness, and that actually the government itself needs to be accountable for the practices and programmes and materials that it's recommending. Then, about a third of the schools were not really supportive of systematic synthetic phonics, which doesn't mean they're not doing phonics in their schools, but they don't believe in it, they're not supportive, they are very committed in the multi-cueing reading strategies. But the multi-cueing reading strategies are what research has shown damages at least some children in their long-term reading habits. And actually, it will stress children if you give them books to read independently that they cannot easily decode, where they have to guess the words to be able to lift the words off the page. And what happens is those kind of multi-cueing reading strategies might appear to serve children well, but in the long term, when the pictures disappear and text becomes more challenging and more of the vocabulary in those books is not matched to children's spoken language, there is nothing left to lift the words off the page but a phonics approach. The summary of all of that is that it's unclear what is going on in our schools, and that therefore it is still chance as to what the nation's children is receiving. Now, what's very worrying is it may well be that as successive governments and different advisors come to pass, that they will once again change the advice for teacher training. So it's very, very important that we continue to build on what's gone on before, and that teachers need to be very evaluative about what they're doing. Now, I am a teacher trainer and a consultant, and I get invited to schools where there may still be resistance to reading, and this resistance can take many forms. Sometimes it's the senior management who are not convinced that the school needs a core programme, and teachers are struggling to provide the content and success that they need, and for that to go on from year to year right throughout primary. Sometimes that resistance is about the teachers themselves. So senior management have recognised that the school or the teachers are not supported by a body of work. The Year 1 Phonics screening check has made it very clear that they're not getting the best results possible, even though the teachers themselves are working very hard. Now, there are all sorts of misunderstandings going around in our teaching profession, including from leading literacy advisors and consultants, and including from Ofsted inspectors themselves. A couple of years ago, Ofsted uploaded some video footage of schools that were getting outstanding national results, but the footage itself included practices that were not at all outstanding. And myself and 5 other people, many with different phonics programs, so once again collaborative, because we're not perceiving that we're in competition, we just want the best possible for our children. We challenged Ofsted about that video footage and pointed out in huge detail what concerned us about it. Now, schools feel very pressurised by Ofsted, and there's a preoccupation as to what Ofsted wants to see in those schools. So if Ofsted uploads footage of what they think is good practice, it means schools will emulate that good practice, when actually the people who are real specialists in the field, people like myself, Ruth Miskin, Sue Lloyd, John Walker, Elizabeth Non-Wheeler, Marlon Grant, all of us collaborating together, are saying, no, we have joint concerns about what you are showing. Now, in his report, Sir Jim Rose pointed out to the notion of the importance of multisensory practice, but he warned against extraneous practice. Now, multisensory practice in the phonics and reading domain has been interpreted by many as being a diet of fun games and activities which really amount to entertainment. If you add on that the notion that's come from letters and sounds, that discrete phonics teaching only needs to be 20 minutes a day, quite frankly, you have a disaster. When you're a teacher teaching 30 or so children, it is impossible to do anything justice in only 20 minutes a day. And teachers should not be restricted, because you don't know how the lesson's going to go. And there's no way that 30 children need the same amount of practice in order to be able to take lots and lots of learning on board. So I want to just show you a glance again of what an alphabetic code looks like. This is the English alphabetic code, and it's a lot of elements to teach and to learn. And people think that we can teach reception and Year 1 children this thoroughly and then the job's done, which is really, really very misguided. You certainly can't teach that through a plethora of fun games and activities based on only 20 minutes a day. So what's happening is that the teaching and learning cycle is very short-changed in many, many schools. Perhaps teachers introduce something quite well, but there isn't sufficient practice per child for every single child to take that learning on board. And then the next day, if the teacher's moved on to introduce another aspect of the alphabetic code, what's happening is many, many children are getting left behind at the get-go, rather than teachers ensuring that every child is keeping up rather than thinking about catching up, and that they've got enough material to extend the children who are quicker to learn. So there's various things that need to be known. Teachers need to know about the simple view of reading and the 2 main processes of word recognition and language comprehension at the level of spoken language. They need to know about the teaching and learning cycle, starting with revisit and review, teacher introducing new material, children practicing it at word level, sentence and text level, and building up spelling word banks. They need to know that the time factor is ridiculous at 20 minutes a day. That's absolutely a mistake. So what many teachers are doing, they're doing a bit of revisit and review and introduce, a fun game and activity, and then going back to the next sort of sound correspondence without giving children the practice that they need to embed that learning and then to extend and expand. And so on. There's many other details like this that need to be thoroughly understood. However, that's long enough for this video, and I hope that it's given people an idea that we've got a long way to go before the teaching profession in England shares a common understanding about the conclusions on research and then how to deliver best practice in their schools. And that debate carries on internationally because a lot of the rest of the world chooses to teach English as an additional language to their children, and they too need to know about the very best programs and practice in order to be effective teachers for effective learning. Thank you.